Warning, empty shelves are coming to a store near you. Well, I think we're about to find out what happens when thousands of Chinese products are no longer able, or more accurately, no longer pouring into the US predominantly. Just wait until you hear the stories I've got for you today, because it's actually worse than we could have even imagined what's happening at the moment. And there's very, very little news coverage on China's response. All you're hearing is the tariff tit for tat, but there's actually stuff going on behind the scenes that is a lot worse than you would even imagine. So we're going to be walking around the reservoir today. We've got a beautiful walk as we go through all of this news here. And it was Wednesday night when I was just about to go to sleep, and I get a message from a client in the USA, which, let me paraphrase here. Neil, I don't know what to do. My business is collapsing. I can't get any goods in. The supplier in China said that the ships are not even going to be going to the US anymore because of this new fee, this penalty that's been enacted on top of the tariff. What do I do? I mean, that is not the sort of message you want to receive just as you're about to put your head on the pillow, especially when it ends with, I've got 3 kids to feed. And we're going to hear a lot more stories like this before this is all over, because I honestly was not expecting to see all of these products disappearing this quickly. I think the only explanation is that there's a lot of people that are out there stockpiling at the moment. For Walmart, Target, dollar stores, and all these others in between to have already run out of some of the Chinese products so fast, I just don't, I can't figure out any other explanation. It must be stockpiling. People must be actually getting the products now, which is smart. I know many of you will not like that, but it's smart because people know that they're just not going to be available. These products will not be available. And if you actually speak to any of the staff in these stores and you ask about these shortages and when the products are going to be back in, they will say they don't know. They haven't got a date. They've asked corporate, they've spoke to their manager. No one knows when these products are going to be back in. Well, I can tell you, some of these products will not come back into stock. They're just not going to come back into stock. And the reason why is because the ships haven't left the ports in China, which means if they want to keep their shelves full, they're going to have to start restocking now. And it's not that simple. You've got to think this through. That means if they want to keep the prices low, they're going to have to start right now sourcing new suppliers in countries other than China. Well, you can't just set up a factory overnight. You've got to set up the equipment, you've got to recruit staff, you've got to train the staff, you've got to set up the supply chain, not to mention the line, the assembly line, and everything else in between. This is going to be absolute chaos. In fact, people are already shocked by the amount of products that have disappeared from all of these online stores. You think eBay and Amazon and all these other online retailers, already the products have just disappeared. In fact, there's been entire stores that have been taken down from these platforms because they're just not going to be selling into the US market anymore. In fact, my wife was surprised because I asked her to reorder a product that we often get, and she said it's not available and it doesn't look like it's going to be coming back in anytime soon. And in fact, talking of my wife, a lot of you have said, I haven't seen her lately. Where is she, Neil?
Hello, it's lovely to see you again. I just wanted to give you a quick reminder that if you hadn't already entered the prize draw to spend the day with me and Neil here on the beautiful Isle of Man, that the link to that is in the description below. And remember, like, all flights, accommodation, food, and drink are covered, so get your tickets.
She should have been one of those shopping channel, women that advertise all those products and stuff. I think that's what we need to get her onto next. So let's carry on then. So countries that want to export products then to the United States are soon going to have to pay massive port fees as well. Because remember, you've got these 245% tariffs. You've also got these massive port fees. And there's even these new rules on Chinese-made ships, cargo ships, which, by the way, is about 50% of all ships in the world are Chinese-made, these cargo ships. So this is going to get, I can't even imagine what is going to happen here. But actually, we're already starting to see that a lot of countries have made statements and declarations, or more specifically, companies within those countries saying that they're not going to be shipping certain products or a lot of products to the US anymore. So think about that logically. If certain companies in other countries are not shipping products to you anymore, there's going to be shortages. There's just no other way around it. There has to be shortages. But this is one I want to bring your attention to. So I was looking up today the trade stats and figures of the US and China. So in 2024 then, the United States imported approximately $439 billion worth of goods from China. However, in the first 2 months of 2025, imports dropped to just $73.3 billion. Just reflect on that a moment. This is compared to $143.5 billion in the same period of 2024. You don't need to be a mathematician to calculate that. It's almost a 50% drop. But one thing that I do want to touch upon, because they've got this completely inaccurate. Everyone keeps saying that China needs the US. Oh, they're going to suffer. Oh, they're going to get hit hard. They need the US consumer. Not really. I mean, China was exporting about 12%. So all of China's exports, it was about 12% to the US. Now it's currently around 6%, could drop to as low as 4 or even 3% in a worst case scenario. So they weren't exporting the bulk to the US in the first place. Like some countries are actually exporting most of their products to the US. China isn't. They kind of prepared for this. And this is, you've got to look at the strategy of China. They have got a long-term strategy. And they prepared for this for a long time, ever since the last trade wars when Trump was president. So I think they knew and expected this, and that's why they expanded their exports to other countries to diversify. You always hear me talking about diversification. I think that's what China did. But actually, one positive thing, or it depends how you look at it, is positive for the government, not for the citizens, is that the US just recorded its biggest ever amount of tariffs. It was $12 billion in a single month that they collected in tariffs. Now, of course, people are celebrating that, think it's a great thing. Well, remember that gets passed on to the consumer or the customer. The government keeps that money. It doesn't get passed to you. Okay, so now here's the next part of that. The whole thing is that, well, now we'll have manufacturing and factories back in the US. Maybe, I think you will get some, but you've got to think how long some of these factories take to set up. It's years. I know that I wouldn't open a factory, a large-scale factory, right now, because what happens if it isn't the same sort of administration in 4 years' time that's in power? Because then you've spent all of that money, and then they might just open up again to China, and the whole market gets flooded, and you're not competitive anymore. But one thing people are overlooking anyway, and that's that even if all of the factories in the US were running like 100% capacity right now, 100%, and even through the night, you still haven't got enough products to replace what comes in from China. I'm sorry, you just don't. I said years and years and years ago, China is the factory of the world. It's become the factory of the world. And other countries are they're giving away everything. They are putting a huge risk by giving everything to China, letting China manufacture everything because it's cheap. Well, that's a huge mistake because it jeopardizes your own security in the country. Everything from jobs to manufacturing to energy production, food, almost everything becomes a jeopardy. Now we're starting to see the repercussions of this throughout the world. And I think we're going to see some big shocks in the future as well, as globalization is beginning to break down. But don't get me wrong, it is also hitting China hard as well. But it's not equal across the board. You've got some of these companies that put all of their eggs in one basket, and they are collapsing. In fact, I found 3 today that are collapsing right now. You've got garment manufactories. These are factories in Guangzhou, notably those supplying Shein. They've completely shut down due to the loss of orders and the tax exemption and all of the lack of US orders. Seafood processing. This is an entire city that exports all of its seafood to the USA. Completely shut down. They're talking about bankruptcy already. And this is actually because of a 170% tariff on the seafood. Shipping and logistics. Shipping companies report a 30% cancellation rate of US orders from China. This is hitting them as well, believe me. So really, if you rely on certain products that you get from China, and let's just hope they don't cut off any of the pharmaceuticals, because that would be really bad. But if you rely on any products that you get from China, you may just want to go out now and do a little bit of a stock up on those products, because some of them are just not going to be coming in. They're not. These ships as well, the cargo ships and the fines they're getting imposed on these cargo ships are huge. There's just no way. I mean, a lot of them have just abandoned the journeys halfway through. There's a story that just came out about the cargo ships that actually had all these customers' orders on, and the customer, or should I say the supplier in China, just said, forget it, we don't want it delivered. You can take over the containers that we've got and the products, you can keep them, because there's just no way they would take a loss when it arrived at the port. But I think this also plays into what I was talking about last week with a 7-prong approach China could take against the US, especially with the de-dollarization acceleration that we are seeing at the moment. And it was an interesting morning this morning, because I woke up and really came to that realization that the forecast I made 5 years ago has sort of come to fruition now. We're almost there with this de-dollarization trend. Now at the moment there isn't really, I still don't think there's anything that can replace the dollar in a fast period of time, but it's getting close now. We are seeing things that could maybe not replace the dollar in global trade, but it could definitely replace it in regional trade. Because as we're seeing this breakdown in globalization, you don't necessarily need one global currency for global trade. You could see different currencies. You could see a BRICS currency that deals with BRICS trade. They don't necessarily need to supply the West with everything that we get. They don't. There's enough trade and money between them just on their own. They don't really need us. Yeah, sure, we've got most of the wealth right now, but times are changing. And I think you only have to go to a lot of major cities and walk around to see how rapidly this change is coming in. But people can't see it. I was trying to explain it to someone recently because they just couldn't see it. And I used the example of weight loss, because he used to be a big guy and now he's a fairly slim guy. And I said, when you were doing your weight loss program, were the people that just didn't notice? And he said, oh yeah. The people, his wife didn't really notice day by day. His family members didn't really notice day by day, some of his friends. But he said that, he would see people in the street, or if he went shopping to the supermarket, and they'd say, whoa, my goodness, look how much weight you've lost. You look like a different man. Wow, you're looking great, and all these other things. And it's the same principle in reverse. When I went back to different cities that I hadn't been to for a long time, many years, and I walk around and I see what's going on there, it's like a shock. It's like seeing that man in the supermarket who you haven't seen in a year. And that's really the best way I can describe what we are seeing in the West, this breakdown, which I don't think is irreversible at this point. I think some of the currency breakdown is irreversible. I just don't know how they're going to fix that problem, because the debt to GDP ratio is just too strong. A bit like this wind today, it's a little bit strong. As we get right by the water here, We're getting the strong winds over the valley. Whoa, that came down hard. Look at that. That is, root ball was really small. But you know, there's just problems non-stop. I mean, even the UK, what they're not saying at the moment is why. Well, actually, let me backtrack. The Bank of England has just put out some feelers, as it were. Everyone is expecting now these aggressive rate cuts. In fact, I pulled a couple of articles for you because I thought you might find this interesting. Okay, it says then we expect interest rates to drop from 4.5% all the way down to 4% by August. This wasn't the Bank of England, this was these sort of reports they do in surveys, and 3.5% by the end of the year. But what they're not really saying is that this is going to increase inflation. Inflation, I think, is already going to hit 3% this year. And that's without these rate cuts. When they put these rate cuts in, they are going to increase inflation. I don't understand why they're not even mentioning that. And that's on top of the energy inflation. And they're trying to cover this all up now. Have you noticed that? All this green stuff that they did and all this massive investment, a lot of it, the money disappeared. We've had all this money disappeared. Now we're getting all these reports that the government just didn't manage that money correctly. They gave out contracts where, let's say a wind turbine should have cost 1x. It actually cost 3x. It's like, well, where did the rest of the money go? So as usual, it's all this government people who spend the public's money. It's not their money, so they don't care. And now all this money sort of disappeared and the projects haven't come online because it wasn't managed properly. They can't connect to the grid. So there's years delay in getting the energy there. They close the coal plants, close the nuclear plants, and we haven't got enough energy. So simple economics 101, you reduce the energy supply and prices go up. That is what happens. So we're all going to have higher energy prices now. And people say the UK is the highest energy in the world. Come to the Isle of Man if you want to see the highest energy. It's even, I don't know what it is, but it's a little bit higher than the UK. So does that mean we've got the highest energy in the world? I'm not sure. Another thing these economists said this week, which was completely inaccurate, was that the economy is so strong so we can have these rate cuts. No, it's not. The economy is ridiculously weak. I mean, if they should have waited a day until that IMF report came out that said the UK is about to get absolutely annihilated. So these economists, they all put out these things quickly because one of them put it out, so all the rest need to put out a statement. They got it completely wrong. The UK economy isn't strong. It's the weakest, and it's getting weaker. And I don't say that with any pride. I say that with disdain. I want a strong UK economy. I want all of you who live in the UK to be prosperous and happy and have just a wonderful life. I want your wages to go up, your living standards to go up. I don't make these complaining videos because I enjoy it. I do it because I want to see some change. And if I educate enough people, maybe we can see some change. But the problem is these politicians, they don't care. They don't care, they're out of touch, they're clueless, they don't live in the real world, and they don't care about their own people. They just don't. They care more about people on the other side of the world or fish on the other side of the world in some ecosystem than they do their own people. So no to all of those economists. Rate cuts don't show that you've got a strong economy. They show that you've got a weak economy, because that's what the UK has. It has a weak economy. So the rate cuts are only going to make it weaker. You use rate cuts to stimulate an economy. That is what they are for. Usually, when you get recessionary periods, you use that because it's the most powerful. It's the last weapon in your arsenal. You don't just use it for the sake of using it. It's a big mistake. It's a really big mistake. And just watch inflation. But there's always a countermeasure to that. Remember that. So what is your countermeasure? It's tangible assets. As always, make sure you have tangible assets, like I always talk about, because when this inflation hits, it's going to weaken everything. Your currency becomes weaker. You don't want to have just money in the bank, right? That is the worst, because that's when the inflation hits, it weakens your savings. But where does all that money go, especially when they create all this new currency, which they will, from the lower interest rates? It will spur investment, it will spur people borrowing. all that money is going to be created. Well, it's not money, it's currency. It's created out of thin air and it goes into asset prices. That's why you're seeing tangible physical assets increasing over the last few years, because they created all this new currency. And with that said, I just want to thank you for being a subscriber here. Really appreciate all of you. We're very close to 500,000 subscribers now, so I honestly can't believe it. 500,000 people subscribe and listen to me. That's just me here on the Isle of Man, just talking randomly into the camera here. All right, thanks so much for being a subscriber. Take care, God bless you, God bless your family, and I'll see you on the next one.